Help me reach 1,000 subscribes. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. I read every comment. Thanks. I never thought a single weekend could tilt my entire marriage off balance. On Friday afternoon, as I packed a small overnight bag, my husband Daniel leaned against the kitchen counter, scrolling on his phone, unusually quiet. I told him I was heading to Brighton to stay with my best friend, Claire. She'd just gone through a rough breakup and didn't want to be alone. Daniel smiled, said it was kind of me, and kissed my cheek. Nothing about that moment felt wrong. If anything, it felt ordinary. Claire and I had been friends since university. She was impulsive, emotional, always landing on her feet somehow. Her boyfriend leaving her had shaken her more than she admitted, so I promised to spend the weekend with her. We ordered takeaway, drank cheap wine, and stayed up late talking about men mistakes and how life never turns out the way you plan. My phone buzzed a few times with messages from Daniel asking if I'd arrived safely, if Claire was okay. I replied with quick reassurances and thought nothing of it. On Saturday morning, Daniel called instead of texting. That alone was unusual. He asked detailed questions, the kind that felt oddly specific. What time did we go to bed? Was anyone else there? Did we go out or stay in? I laughed it off, teasing him for sounding like my father. He laughed too, but there was a pause before he said he just missed me. By Sunday afternoon, I was ready to go home. Claire seemed steadier, less fragile than she'd been on Friday. As I drove back, I rehearsed the familiar comfort of slipping into my routine. Daniel making dinner. The quiet hum of our house. When I pulled into the driveway, Daniel's car was already there, but the house felt different when I stepped inside. Too quiet, too clean. Daniel hugged me a little too tightly, a little too long. He asked if Claire was really okay, if she'd talked about her ex much, if she planned to move on quickly. His questions piled up until I finally asked why he was so curious. He shrugged, said he was just making conversation, but his eyes flicked away from mine. That was the first moment I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. That evening, while we ate dinner, Daniel barely touched his food. He kept checking his phone, angling the screen away from me. When I asked if something was wrong, he said work was stressful. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. After years of marriage, you learn the difference. I went to bed early, exhausted from the drive, while he stayed up, saying he had emails to catch up on. I woke up in the middle of the night to find the side of the bed empty. The glow from the living room light spilled faintly into the hallway. I lay there listening, my heart beating faster for no clear reason. When Daniel finally came to bed, he slid in quietly. I pretended to be asleep, every sense alert. Over the next few days, his behavior shifted in subtle ways. He started showering twice a day. He changed his passwords. He became affectionate in public, but distant when we were alone. Each change on its own meant nothing. Together, they formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. I asked myself if I was being paranoid, if guilt over leaving him alone was coloring my thoughts. Deep down, I knew something had changed. On Thursday evening, I noticed a name pop up on his phone while it sat face down on the table. Claire. My breath caught. I didn't say anything. I waited. Daniel flipped it over quickly, his jaw tightening before he relaxed his face again. He said Claire had messaged him to thank him for letting me come stay with her. That explanation sounded reasonable. That night, lying beside him, I stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the weekend. The questions, the pauses, the way he'd held me when I got home, as if he were afraid I'd disappear again. I realized with sinking clarity that whatever had shifted in my marriage hadn't started when I left. It had only revealed itself when I did. I told myself I would ask him the next day, unaware that the truth waiting beneath his silence would change how I understood loyalty, friendship, and the man I thought I married forever. The next morning, I watched Daniel move through the kitchen like a guest in his own house. He kissed my forehead, poured coffee, avoided my eyes. I decided not to circle the truth anymore. After dinner that night, I asked him to sit with me. He looked relieved, like he'd been bracing for impact. I told him calmly that I'd noticed the changes. The late nights, the secrecy, Claire's name on his phone. I didn't accuse. I just asked him to explain. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he exhaled, slow and heavy, and rubbed his hands together the way he does when he's nervous. He admitted that Claire had called him Friday night, after I'd gone to bed. She was drunk, crying, saying she felt abandoned, saying she didn't know how to be alone. Daniel said he answered because he was worried. He listened. He tried to calm her down, but she kept calling. Saturday morning, Saturday night, Sunday before I left. Each time, she leaned harder on him, telling him things she'd never told me. How she'd always envied my marriage. How lonely she felt watching other people build lives, while hers kept collapsing. Daniel said he felt responsible. He said he didn't want to upset me while I was already carrying her emotional weight, so he kept it quiet. The secrecy, he claimed, was betrayal. It was protection. I listened, wanted to believe him, wanting the story to end there, but something still didn't sit right. I asked him why he'd changed his passwords, why he'd been distant with me, but hyper-aware of where I'd been and who I was with. His face tightened. He admitted there was more. On Sunday night, after I left Claire's flat, she came over. She said she needed to drop off a bag I'd forgotten. Daniel said he should have told me, that he knew crossing that line was wrong. He swore nothing physical happened. He said she cried on our sofa, said she didn't know why she always wanted what other people had. Then she kissed him. He pulled away, asked her to leave. She did. I sat there, my hands folded in my lap, feeling something fracture quietly inside me. It wasn't rage. It was grief. Grief for the simplicity I'd lost, for the trust that now had conditions attached. I asked him why he hadn't told me immediately. He said he was ashamed, afraid I'd blame myself for going away, afraid I'd see him differently. The next day, I drove to Claire's flat alone. She opened the door with red eyes and a forced smile. I didn't raise my voice. I told her Daniel had told me everything. Her face crumpled. She apologized, said she hadn't meant to cross a line, said loneliness had made her reckless. I told her intentions didn't erase consequences. I told her our friendship needed distance, maybe permanently. Driving home, I realized how easily loyalty can be mistaken for silence, how protecting feelings can become protecting lies. Daniel and I talked for hours that night. We didn't fix everything. We didn't pretend it hadn't hurt. But we agreed on boundaries, on honesty that doesn't wait for permission, on choosing the marriage even when it's uncomfortable. Weeks passed. Things slowly settled. Not back to how they were, but into something more deliberate. Claire stopped calling. I stopped explaining myself. Daniel stopped hiding. Trust didn't snap back into place. It rebuilt itself, piece by piece, through transparency and hard conversations. What stayed with me most wasn't the kiss or the secrecy. It was how close I'd come to losing clarity by doubting my instincts. That quiet voice that noticed patterns, that asked questions before damage turned permanent. Supporting a friend had exposed a weakness, not just in my marriage, but in the way I believed good intentions were enough. They aren't. Love needs boundaries. Loyalty needs light. And sometimes the most suspicious behavior isn't betrayal itself, but the silence that gives it room to breathe.